Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing the first of my origin character builds. This is going to be a new build series on the channel that is going to run until it is finished. So, we're starting off with Karlach, and then we will do other builds like Astarion and Gale, until we have covered all of the origin characters, finishing with the Dark Urge. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, because people have requested origin builds for a while, and two, because I want to record a big backlog of videos so that I have enough content to last over the entire Christmas holidays, because I'm going to be busy during that time, and this seemed like a good time to bust out this series. So let's get a couple of rules out of the way first. Number one, each of these builds is going to start with the character's original class, that being Barbarian for Karlach, for example, or Cleric for Shadowheart. The only things that are going to change are multiclassing and subclasses. So, because if you didn't know, and I've been warned about this a couple of times, if you change the base class of an origin character, for example, if we changed Karlach to a bard, you would lose a lot of dialogue options that would normally be related to the character, so as such I'm going to be trying to keep the main classes the same for each, and try not to change the subclasses too much for those who get the subclasses at level 1. The only one I might do that for is Shadowheart, but we'll see. So for now we're going to be starting with Karlach, and like I say, this is going to be a Barbarian build. However, the builds don't necessarily have to have the initial level be the main focus, because for this, we are going to be starting as a Barbarian, but most of our levels are going to be going into something else. So I won't delay anymore, let's get into it. Like I said, we are going to be starting as a Barbarian to get things like Rage and Unarmored Defense, which we do want. And as for our ability scores, they do look a little bit strange, but let me explain. Strength is at 12. In Baldur's Gate 3, you don't actually need to have strength to be a barbarian, as dexterity weapons do now work with rage, and that is what we're here for. However, we do want a little bit of strength for a strategy we're going to get into later. Constitution is at 14. Again, this is a bit low for our barbarian, but we are going to be bumping this up with our equipment. So we're going to get a +2 to this, rounding it out at 16, which is going to work okay. Intelligence and Charisma are our dump stats, and Wisdom is also at 16 because it is one of our more important stats, and we absolutely need it. As for our proficiencies, Karlach comes with the Outlander background, meaning she has Athletics and Survival, so I've just gone with Perception and Intimidation. Now next up at level 2, I actually want to multi-class immediately, because I want to get the main bulk of what our kind of bread and butter kit is going to be, before kind of going into the higher levels. And we don't need our Barbarian subclass right away. We only really just need the basic Rage to kind of get that feeling of playing Karlach still, and for the benefits that we'll get from that as well. But for now, I want to go straight into our multi-class, which is Monk, and I'll explain why when it becomes relevant. But for now, it's going to give us things like unarmored movement, the ability to bump up our unarmed strikes to a 1d4, and flurry of blows for a bonus action attack. We want all of this. At Monk level 2, we are going to get a few extra features, that being our Patient Defense and Step of the Wind Dash and Disengage. This is going to allow us to, have a bit more to do during our bonus action, but we're not going to be using these as much. Next up at Monk level 3, we are going to be getting our subclass, and I'm going with Way of the Four Elements, because there was something that always bothered me about playing as Karlach or having her in your party in this game. Despite a heavy theming on fire, literally her infernal engine is running so hot that, it's actually dangerous. It blew my mind that she never actually got any fire-based abilities. Yes, technically she gets, because she's a Zariel Tiefling, Searing Smite, but that can only be used basically once per day, and not while you're raging, so what was the point really? So I wanted to figure out a way, okay, how do we get fire-based attacks with Barbarian's rage restrictions, and Way of the Four Elements Monk is the best way to do it. We straight up get fire spells, but because they're not considered spells, they're considered class actions, we still get to cast them while raging, meaning we are now a flaming, raging Barbarian Monk, which is super cool. So we're going to go with Way of the Four Elements, which is going to give us Harmony of Fire and Water. While not in combat, once per long rest, you can restore half your key points rounded down, giving you a bit more resources. And now we also have Disciple of the Elements, and there's 3 that we're going to grab. Fangs of the Fire Snake is the most obvious one. It makes a ranged unarmed strike attack that is going to deal 1d6 damage because of our current monk level, but it also does an extra 1d10 fire damage on top of that, with the additional bonus being that our next attack, either with a weapon or with an unarmed strike, is going to do an additional 1d4 fire damage, which is super good. But the cool thing about this is Fangs of the Fire Snake is considered an attack, so it triggers the extra attack feature. So your main bread and butter combo is going to be your first attack is Fangs of the Fire Snake, and then your next attack with your weapon is going to do extra fire damage, which is super good. That's perfect for what we're trying to do. Next up, we're going to take Sweeping Cinder Strike. This is just basically Burning Hands, an AoE cone in front of you of fire damage, 3d6 at this level, which is perfect. This is great for Karlach. And finally, we're going to be doing Sphere of Elemental Balance. This one is going to have the largest range. It's going to be a large orb of fire, because you can choose the fire variant. It's the same as Chromatic Orb, which will create a fire surface where it lands, which is super, super good, dealing 2d8 fire damage. Now we have a full kit of various fire damage attacks, which is awesome. At monk level 4, we are going to be grabbing our first feat, and you already know what I'm going for here. We are going to grab Tavern Brawler, and we're going to use this to bump our strength up to a 13, because if we grab Ethel's Boon and the Potion of Everlasting Vigour, we can get a total of 16 strength and 16 dex, meaning that both our dexterity modifier and our strength modifier are going to be added to our unarmed attacks, improvised weapons, and throw attacks. Because if you don't know how Tavern Brawler works, Tavern Brawler with its description assumes that your strength is already going to be higher for calculating the damage of these things, but in actuality, if you're a monk, it uses both your dex modifier and then your strength modifier after that, so we essentially get to double up on damage, which is super good. And I want this build to be able to do all of the things I would think a Battle Rager would do. In addition to the fire stuff, I want to be able to, punch things, but also use like an axe and like be able to pick up enemies or items and throw them at other enemies. Like, that's kind of the whole point. I want this to be like a full, like, if the Hulk was on fire type deal. That's kind of what I'm going for here. And I really, really like the idea of using Tavern Brawler mixed with those kind of in-game buffs to really bump up the attack here. But since for this Origin character build series, this is the only build I'm going to be using these buffs on. I will not be taking Ethel's Boon or the Potion of Everlasting Vigour into consideration for any of my future Origin character builds, because while these are designed that you would kind of play them all separately, I want them to be able to be used as a team. If you just wanted to run all of my Origin character builds on one save file, there's not going to be any overlap of like equipment or stat boosting items, so this is the only Origin character build where I'm going to use these buffs. The rest will not have them. But with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's keep going. And finally, at monk level 5, we're going to get extra attack, which is what I'm here for. This is going to allow us to attack twice in one turn, again going for that Fang of the Fire Snake, plus weapon attack combo, which is going to help you deal a ton of damage. You're also going to get Stunning Strike, but it's a bit whatever. And then at monk level 6, we are going to get an additional Disciple of the Elements spell, and of course we're going to be grabbing Embrace of the Inferno. This is going to allow us to expel the fire burning through our veins as 3 flaming rays. Each ray dealing 2d6 damage. It's Scorching Ray, but it does a bit more damage. Well, not a bit more damage than Scorching Ray, but it does a bit more damage than like some of our other fire options. It's Scorching Ray. Leave me alone. It's been a long day. At monk, well, we're going to jump, I think at this level, you're going to want to jump back over to Barbarian. You can technically do it right after you get extra attack, but I kind of wanted to get that extra spell first. But now going back over to Barbarian, we are going to get things like Danger Sense, giving us advantage on dex saves against traps, spells, and surfaces, pretty good. But it's also going to give us Reckless Attack, allowing us to gain advantage on our attack rolls, with the caveat that enemies gain advantage to hit us. But it's a pretty good feature anyway, especially since when you're a Raging Barbarian, you're going to be resistant to a lot of things, and because we are a Tiefling, we're going to get an innate fire resistance, meaning that we're going to be resistant to slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning, and fire damage, which is the most common damage type in all of D&D. Fire, the most common spell damage. You get what I mean, but overall, the fact that enemies are going to have an advantage to hit us isn't going to be too much of a problem. This is quite a tanky build. And then finally, at Barbarian level 3, we get to pick our subclass, and honestly, this is a pick your favourite situation. No subclass is outright going to be better than the others for this kind of setup, since we're not really going too far into Barbarian. In fact, this is our final level in it. But But with this, you could go with the Wild Heart if you wanted to take a bestial heart like Bear for the resistances, or Wolf to give your allies advantage, which I could totally see Karlach doing. Wild Magic could be really fun. Maybe the fire inside is burning out of control, and as such, you know, a bunch of wild magic stuff kind of happens around her. That could be cool. But I am personally going to be going with Berserker because throwing Barbarian is one of my favourite playstyles in this game. I'm currently doing a playthrough with my friend Private Noodles where I'm playing a build like this, and it is super, super fun. It's some of the most fun I've had playing this game. So if I can, I like to get a little, whenever I make a strength-based build, if I can get a bit of throwing in there, I like to try. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to get our bonus action attacks, being Frenzied Strike and Enraged Throw. Because we're a monk, we don't necessarily need Frenzied Strike as much, although it is pretty good if you're running low on key points. It is a really good kind of last resort option. But Enraged Throw is what we're really here for, allowing us to use our bonus action to pick up an item or creature and throw it at a target, dealing additional damage and knocking it prone. And it is affected by strength, but again, with Ethel's Boon and the Potion of Everlasting Vigour, our strength is going to be at a full total of 16, which is pretty good for this. Again, we're spreading our stats a bit thin here in the sake of being kind of trying to get a lot of things into a single package, but this build isn't necessarily meant to be optimized. It's meant to be fun and on theme and kind of, you know, what I want it to be, and I feel like it accomplishes that really well while still being a strong build, as you'll see later. Now, you could go to Barbarian level 4 if you don't care about going to level 9 of Monk, but level 9 of Monk does give you a few things, like the highest damage tier of your 4-element spells, and the highest damage tier of your unarmed strikes. But if you care more about getting an extra feat, like for example Elemental Adept Fire, you absolutely could. Or an extra ability score improvement, you could. But I want to go back to Monk, and I want to stay there for now. Going back to Monk is going to give us a few things. Evasion. If a spell or effect would deal half damage on a successful dexterity saving throw, it deals no damage if you succeed and only half damage if you fail. And remember, we are a Barbarian with Danger Sense, meaning we have advantage on dexterity saving throws, which means we're going to be able to take no damage from this sort of thing much more often than usual. And we also have Stillness of Mind, meaning we can't be charmed or frightened, which is pretty damn awesome. I feel like Karlach wouldn't fall for people's bullshit again. At Monk level 8, we are going to be grabbing our second feat, and here you have a choice. Well, it's going to be an ability score improvement, but what you want to improve is entirely up to you. If you want more strength, taking it to a total of 18 with all our buffs, you can. If you want to bump to your dexterity, you can. If you want to bump to your con, again, total of 18, you can. I'm going to be personally bumping our wisdom, though, so we have a better spell save DC with our monk abilities, but it's entirely up to you. Take whatever you like here. Hell, you may even want to drop Tavern Brawler in this build if you don't really care about that and just go all the way with Dex and Wisdom, which you absolutely could do, but I kind of want a Tavern Brawler, so I went with it. And finally, at Monk level 9, again, as I've already said, we've reached the highest tier of spell damage and unarmed strike damage. Our unarmed strikes are now a D8 overall, which is super, super good. But we're also going to get a couple of extra things, like advanced unarmored movement, so difficult terrain does not slow us down, and we can jump even further. We also gain improved elemental casting, like I said, which is the damage buff. And also, we are going to get to choose another spell. Now, we've kind of got all of the fire spells, so there's nothing really too on theme here. So if you wanted to just go for, like, Fists of the Unbroken Air, to just be able to just punch so hard that it pierces the air and knocks an enemy prone, like fucking Ultra Instinct Goku or something, you absolutely can. But there's a ton of things here. I mean, Clench of the Northwind is probably my meta pick, because being able to basically cast Hold Person on 2 people, because you get to double cast it at level 9, you get to twin cast it, is super, super good and could work well for this build, since we're not oh, but you can't maintain concentration while raging. That is true, so that will not work. I've just realised that. Oh, so yeah, I'm just going to go with my original choice with Fist of the Unbroken Air for 4d10 bludgeoning damage at range, which is pretty good. And that is the build. Overall, I think you're going to get a super fun playstyle with this. The ability to manipulate fire as Karlach while still being able to rage, being able to punch a ton of times with your flurry of blows, again we have 10 key points here, being able to throw people all over the battlefield, throw weapons, throw items, throw whatever. It's super, super fun, and I really, really think you're going to enjoy this build setup. And when we get into the equipment, there's a lot of room, like, depending on, like, what kind of stat boosting equipment you want to use, you might be able to swap a ton of stuff around here, but I've got a setup here that I quite like, so I hope you do too. Let's get into it. First up, we have the Cap of Wrath. During combat, when the wearer starts their turn with less than half of their hit points, they gain Wrath. And what Wrath does is adrenaline courses through your veins. You have a +1 bonus to damage with melee weapons. So we're just going to get a bit more damage off of our main weapon attacks, which is pretty good. This is just a solid Act 1 option. There are going to be better options when you get into Act 3, like the Bone Spike Helmet, for example. But I feel like this is a solid option as we can stack this Wrath feature with another piece of equipment that we have. Our cloak doesn't really matter. I've gone with the Cindermoth Cloak, Cindermoth Cloak. A creature that damages the wearer within 2 meters receives burning. It's just a way that if enemies get too close, they're going to get too hot, which is literally what happens with Karlach anyway. This just allows that to come across mechanically. But if you want a bit more AC, the Cloak of Protection would work really nice, but I quite like the Cindermoth Cloak overall. Next up is the Enraging Heart Garb. While raging, the wearer generates 2 turns of wrath, so again, we're going to be able to boost that up even more. But the main draw here is this is going to give us Constitution +2, bumping us up to a 16. Oh, and on that topic, you can see that I have a 14 in Strength here because of Auntie Ethel's Boon. I have a mod that lets me get Auntie Ethel's Boon, but I've not been able to find a working mod to let me get the Potion of Everlasting Vigour early, so unfortunately I can't show that off fully. So in the combat footage you'll see later, we are going to be working with 14 Strength, but do note that this build will be stronger if you get that potion. But like I was saying, if you don't care about Tavern Brawler, feel free to get rid of Strength anyway. Next up, you have a couple of options for your gloves. We have the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle. Your unarmed attacks deal an additional 1 to 4 fire damage, and you can cast Scorching Ray. Now, obviously you can't cast Scorching Ray while raging, so this is mainly just for the extra fire damage on our unarmed strikes, but hey, it's still nice to have. But if you're not too into that, you can go for the Gloves of Uninhibited Kashigo. These can be obtained in Act 1, same as the Cinder and Sizzle gloves, and they're going to do an additional 1d4 damage with throw attacks and attacks made with improvised weapons, so if you want to lean more into that throwing Barbarian playstyle, you have that to work with. There is another set of gloves you could use if you wanted to lean more into the heat mechanic, which I'll get into in a minute as well, which are the Thermo Arcanic gloves. I'll have a infographic on screen now, which basically means that whenever you deal fire damage, which you're going to be doing all the fucking time, you're going to gain 2 turns of heat. And what that means is basically you could actually use the heat mechanic on Karlach, which I feel like makes sense thematically anyway. And I'll get more into what heat actually does in a moment, but if you really wanted to go full on into the heat mechanic, you could do that. Speaking of the heat mechanic, let's get into the weapon really quickly while I'm on the topic. This is the Thermodynamo Axe. You can obtain this right at the start of Act 2, and whenever you deal damage with it, you gain 2 turns of heat. It is a +1 weapon, so it works pretty nicely here. And again, it's a one-handed weapon, meaning it can be used as a monk weapon, scaling with our dexterity or our strength, depending on which is higher. Again, if you kind of wanted to play for more dexterity-based playstyle, this will still work. But again, if you wanted to play with the heat mechanic, this works out quite nicely. And again, because it works as a monk weapon, it will trigger your monk features. But if you wanted to kind of change this up and go with something a bit more powerful once you go into Act 3, you could grab the Hellfire Great Axe, which, I mean, look at it. It's freaking cool. It's like the Everburn Blade, but good. This is going to deal an extra 1d6 fire damage with every attack, and it's the same effect as the Thermodynamo Axe. Whenever you deal damage with it, you gain 2 turns of heat. And I'll just quickly go over what heat does. You take 1d4 fire damage each turn, but can use Heat Convergence. And you consume all of your stacks of heat when you use heat conversions, and then on the next fire damage attack, you deal an additional 1 fire damage for every turn of heat remaining. So it's basically like a big kaboom. Heat isn't my favourite status effect in this game, but I feel like for Karlach it is so thematically appropriate that it would make sense to go for it regardless. So yeah, I quite like this. You also do get a unique attack with this, which is called the Hellflame Cleave, which is kind of the same as Cleave, but it's going to burn your enemies as well, which I think is pretty nice. Let me just make sure that this... Oh no, it actually inflicts rolling hellfire. Flames of the Heart of Avernus engulf this entity, and dealing 66 fire damage. That's insane. That is a supernova attack. So I would recommend changing up to this once you get to Act 3. However, do note that because this is a two-handed weapon, it will only use your strength, so you're going to want to use this with the Potion of Everlasting Vigour setup. And it won't trigger your bonus action on arm strikes, so you will have to burn key points for your bonus action attacks or use Frenzied Strike. But this will work out quite nicely for you if you wanted to go with something like that, and I personally would. If you combine this with maybe like the Thermo Arcanic gloves as well, if you really wanted to lean into the heat mechanic, you could get off massive heat attacks over and over and over again, but I'm focusing less on this build, just because, again, I'm not a huge fan of the heat mechanic. For our amulet, you get the Sentient Amulet. You can get a weaker version of this right away in Act 1, which is going to give you the ability to restore half of your key points once per long rest. And then later on into Act 3, you can upgrade it to the full version, which is going to give you full key point restoration. You restore key points equal to your martial arts die. So for us, that's a 1d8, so you're going to recover 8 key points, which is super, super good. Our rings are the Ring of Flinging, just to give us a bonus to throw damage. And this here is the Ring of Self-Immolation, allowing you to set yourself on, basically grant yourself 2 turns of heat immediately, once per short rest, if you really wanted to lean into that heat mechanic again. But feel free to swap this out for whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. And as for our ranged weapon, I've gone with the Hellfire Engine crossbow, just because I feel like Hellfire made sense. Really, you can put any ranged weapon on Karlach here, it's not really going to matter, but this is just a nice, powerful option that comes with the extra bonus of being able to use Lightning Arrow, which isn't really on theme, but hey, why not? And also Reposition Malefactor to pull enemies close so you can beat the shit out of them. But I kind of like the idea that maybe towards the end of the game she takes a weapon from spoilers. So, you know, I feel like that makes perfect sense. And I've just realised I forgot to talk about the boots. These are the boots of Uninhibited Kashigo, which allows the wearer's unarmed attacks to deal additional damage equal to their Wisdom modifier. So our unarmed strikes are going to use our Dex modifier, our Strength modifier, and our Wisdom modifier, making them super, super strong. This is an Act 3 option, however, so feel free to use whatever you like in the meantime. Something like the Boots of Speed, or the Evasive Shoes, or even the Disintegrating Nightwalkers will all work perfectly with this build. And last but not least, I recommend picking up the Drake Throat Glaive to buff your weapon with extra fire damage and also a +1 to its overall stats. So for example, with something like the Thermo Dynamo Axe, if you equip the this weapon and use, where is it? Oh, I can't use it because I haven't taken a long rest, but you think I'd remember to do that by now. But you could buff it with fire and make it so give it an extra one, giving the weapon an extra 1d4 fire damage and a +1 bonus to attack rolls. So overall, I feel like that is a recommended option. So yeah, that is the build. Overall, what you're getting with this is a very fast, very mobile Karlach, who does a ton of extra fire damage and has options of both close range and ranged, but all the tankiness you get from rage and the ability to go full on insane with throwing and high power punches and, you know, massive axe attacks, and it's gonna feel like you are playing a super cool, super fiery, super on theme version of Karlach that you wouldn't normally get if you went straight Barbarian. In fact, the most fun part about this build is the fact that Karlach, when she does like martial arts moves, like flurry of blows and the like, she will actually do like the old style kung fu movie, wha ya wha, and it's the funniest thing. It honestly feels like Monk was made for Karlach. Seriously, it is so fun. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this build overall. Again, I'm looking forward to doing the rest of the origin character builds. I don't know which one I'm going to do next. I'm just going to kind of do whichever ones come to me as it kind of feels right. And like I say, so the next probably couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks and a bit, because there's quite a few origin characters to go through. There's enough to fill a couple of weeks with the current upload schedule. These are going to be the builds that you're going to be seeing for quite a while. Again, I want to record these as a backlog so that I have enough stuff to do, so I have enough content to put out over the Christmas holidays. Speaking of the Christmas holidays, not this weekend, which as of time of recording is tomorrow. So Sunday let me just check the date. Sunday the 17th, we're going to be doing our regular live stream. We're going to be live streaming part 2 of our Honor Mode run. But, which I guess would have already happened by the time this video goes up, so I don't know why I'm talking about it here. But next weekend, which will be December the 24th, which is Christmas Eve, I will not be streaming. Obviously, it's Christmas Eve. I'll be spending time with family. However, what I will have at that time scheduled to go up is my Lethal Company video that I've been spending the past month working on. It is a highly edited, at least in my opinion, high quality video. It's a bit long. It's about just over half an hour of just highly edited, really funny bits from me and my friend's first time ever playing the game. So I'm really, really hoping you guys enjoy that one. I just showed it to all my friends, the finished version, earlier today, and they absolutely loved it. And if that video, you know, does well and people want to see more, we did just record an extra big dollop of footage where we played with some mods and on the new update, so we had no idea what was going on. That might become a video as well if there is enough requests for it. But I think for now I'm just going to leave the commentary and I'll leave you with the combat footage as I imagine it is rolling over, since it was quite a long one this time. But anyways, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you all next time.
That's what I get for devil bashing. Let's get out of here.